Good day, Potterheads. Thanks for visiting the page. Here we are with a new chapter of Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. Here we are with Chapter 43, The Holy Grail.
Chapter 43, Sacrifice. Chapter text. Awareness came back to Harry slowly. As soon as he stepped out of the room, he felt stunned and disoriented, as if he had just drunk an entire bottle of wine by himself. As they had promised, they had given Merlin a head start, and when Harry and Ginny exited the Department of Mysteries, he began to feel indignant. How could I just let him leave? He asked himself, appalled. Ginny appeared as flabbergasted and bewildered as he felt. So stunned was he that he opened his mouth several times to speak before remembering that he was at the Ministry of Magic in the dead of night, and it would probably be for the best if he did not speak. The Horcrux was heavy in his palm, and because he couldn't talk out loud, he argued fiercely with himself. How could I just trust him like that? You didn't have much of a choice. And he didn't hurt you, did he? But he could have. He didn't. He also didn't tell me anything. Maybe he had his reasons. He stole the cloak. An ephemeral thought flitted through his mind so quickly that he nearly grasped something important, but then it was lost again. I hate it when that happens, Harry thought sullenly. He poked and prodded his emotions and realized that he was only annoyed because his curiosity had not been satisfied. He trusted Merlin. Sort of. I don't think he's a Death Eater or anything. You're a moron. He got the Horcrux. Fine, Harry thought sulkily, but I wish I knew who he is. His internal argument kept him company back to the point from which they could apparate back to Godric's Hollow. Ginny grasped his hand tightly, spun on the spot, and they vanished together with a loud crack. Harry opened his eyes a moment after to find Ron and Hermione sitting very close to one another on an armchair. The other two looked up, and Harry saw that they were afraid to hear the news. It seems like so long ago, that kind of despair, he thought, filled with wonder. But the rune had washed the despair away like a cleansing rain, leaving behind a sense of purpose and love. It was like the best parts of Harry had been illuminated, and the knowledge that he could do this with his head held high was priceless beyond measure. Did you? No. Ginny's voice was strong. Hermione abruptly stood up and walked out of the room without speaking another word. Harry watched her go. He knew the words that would comfort her, but he did not think that he ought to be the one to tell her. He had seen a glimpse of her face, and he knew that any words coming from him would only make her anguish worse. I'll go, Ginny said. I'll tell her what I saw, what I felt. Harry nodded. He threw himself down on the sofa and stretched out his legs. A part of him still marveled at the peace he felt. Thank you, Luna, he said fervently. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Merlin, since you probably told her to tell us to go there. So, Ron's voice cut into his thoughts. Harry blinked. There's nothing, Ron asked. His voice was raspy. He sounded like an old man. There's nothing you can do. No, Harry said gently. His vision doubled, and he remembered the scenes that had passed before his eyes. Ron had figured into a great many of him. Brave, loyal Ron who had a very large heart, even when he didn't know it. He chuckled softly. You think it's funny? Ron asked incredulously. Harry saw that his eyes were wet. Not that, no, Harry admitted. But I think that love room turned me into a girl. What? Ron said blankly. It, helped me understand a lot about love, Harry said. He ruffled his hair nervously. He and Ron talked about loads of things, but they'd never been much for sharing feelings. Not to sound like Dumbledore, but when I was confronted with how many decisions I've made because of love, and not just the big stuff, but the little things, I've got to agree that it's the most powerful force in the universe. Ron's brows scrunched together, but he didn't say anything. Harry didn't say anything for a long moment. Is that why Merlin wanted me to go into that room? Will help me do what has to be done? Did I keep trying to find another solution and fall into something dark? His belly flooded with ice at the thought, but he realized now how much despair he had felt. It was like having a lamp turned on in a room in which his eyes had gotten used to near total darkness. And I might have even justified it, Harry thought guiltily, because I didn't want to leave Ginny. Oh, he was certain that he would not have made a Horcrux, but he was unable to judge now how far he would have gone to survive. It's a blessing, Harry said suddenly. Voldemort can be beaten. Don't you dare, Ron said. He glared at Harry. If you say that it's an easy solution, I'll punch you. It isn't an easy solution, Harry said. It's worth it, though, Ron. And if you were me, you'd feel exactly the same way. I don't know if I could do it, Ron said. He had his head in his hands again. I just don't know. I'm selfish. His voice was muffled, and Harry had to lean forward to hear him. I'm not like you, Harry. Can you imagine if we were exactly the same person? Harry asked dryly. Hermione wouldn't have survived our moods. Ron snorted. Harry squirmed and grimaced, feeling immensely uncomfortable. Listen, I think you could do it. You just don't have to. And I'm really grateful for that. Harry took a deep breath. He wished these types of things could just be understood, and that Harry did not have to speak these words. Hey, Ron. We've, been friends for a while. I'm not going to date you. Harry, Ron chuckled, but sounded a bit forced. He obviously sensed an emotional moment in the offing. He looked up, and when Harry met the eyes of his best mate, he felt a great bloody lump in his throat. Damn, this is just going to make it worse. I'm glad it was you, Harry said. He cleared his throat, but the lump persisted, and now tears were stinging the backs of his eyes. Great, just great. If I could have chosen any bloke to come back in time with me, I wouldn't have even had to think about it. I couldn't. If you hadn't been here, I really don't think I would have made it this far. They stood up and moved forward into a hug at exactly the same moment. Ron slapped him on the back with enough force that Harry thought he might bruise, and he squeezed tightly enough that he thought he might have heard one of Ron's ribs crack. I think maybe you were right, Ron said. I think maybe that room did turn you into a girl. They both laughed. Ron pretended not to notice that a few tears squeezed out of Harry's eyes, even though he tried his best to hold it in, and Harry did the same when Ron had to turn around and swipe at his face. Will you do me a favor? Harry asked quietly. Of course, Ron said. Harry could hear the anything tacked on, though Ron didn't say it. I've got something to do, Harry said. I want to be with Ginny, and I need to make something. He did not know what he had planned until the words were out of his mouth, but he wanted to make absolutely certain that they would be all right. He did not want Voldemort to be allowed to hurt them. My part is at the beginning, and I don't really want to plan the battle, or tell people what to do, or anything like that. Plus, I'm the master strategist, Ron said modestly. He tried to smile, but it kept slipping off his face. Of course, Harry. 3 days passed in a flurry of activity in which Harry did not take part. He stayed in Godric's Hollow with Ginny. He was doing his best to offer those he loved one last measure of protection. Ron must have warned everyone that Harry had things to do. Harry suspected that Ron had alluded to the terrible power, and no one questioned his absence in the planning. He spent the evenings with the Weasleys, Remus, Tonks, Dumbledore, and anyone else who could join them. They did not speak about the final battle, and Harry's feeling of clarity and peace did not diminish, but was strengthened. He thought that might have something to do with the runes that he had been making for those he loved. His mother had invoked ancient magic when she had sacrificed herself for Harry. Harry wanted his own sacrifice to be the same. But because he did not want to take any chances, and because he thought it might work, he asked Sirius if he could melt down the silver goblets. Sirius had given him his wholehearted approval, and he set about making talismans. It was late afternoon on the day before they were to draw Voldemort into battle. Harry could not avoid hearing some things, and Harry was nearly done with his project. He set aside the talisman that he had made for Ron, pulled a clump of silver toward him, and then stared. He thought that it would be the same for each person. Ginny, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Dumbledore, Percy, Fred, George, and all the rest. He didn't think that each would be so highly individual, and as that awareness grew, he had held off making the last 4. Ron's is done, he said gruffly. Ginny reached over and rubbed his neck with gentle hands. Which one will you make next? She asked softly. Your mum's, I think, Harry said. I'm saving yours for last. Harry had been surprised to realize that he was actually capable of very complex emotions. He'd thought that he loved everyone the same way, though he had to admit that he loved some people more than others. But he didn't. Creating the runes out of the silver forced him to plumb the depths of his own emotions. something he was not particularly comfortable with. They even looked different. Luna's, for example, looked fragile. The lines of the rune were thinner, though still strong, and appeared delicate. Dumbledore's was all exaggerated lines, and was larger than the others. They were all different. Molly Weasley, he thought. He raised his wand and began to carve. He did not even have to look at the etched rune in front of him. He knew the shape very well. He let his mind drift, as it always did when he made a talisman. He thought of her mothering, and how it had defined her for so long. I sort of forgot that she was a person, Harry thought, a bit guiltily. She was very fierce in protecting those she loved. A line of the rune took on the shape of a claw, and he couldn't help but smile. He continued on, and he realized that it was not so difficult after all, thinking about everything he loved about her. It didn't hurt. He still had the knowledge that she was his Molly Weasley. That's beautiful. Ginny breathed in his ear. You say that after every single one, Harry said. It's true, though, Ginny said stoutly. It's amazing to watch. Sometimes I can see something flash, and it's like I'm having another vision. I'm remembering what I saw, said Harry. He loved that she had not questioned what he was doing. She had not asked him if it was really necessary. She understood that he must do everything he can, and if that meant doing something that wasn't strictly necessary, it was necessary for Harry. It was easier to make Arthur's talisman than it was to make Molly's. Harry thought it might have something to do with what had happened at Azkaban, but Harry felt he knew the older wizard better, and that he had a stronger grasp on who he was. And it made him laugh when Harry's appreciation of Arthur's childlike love of Muggles translated over to a line, the same line that appeared to be a claw on Molly's, looking like the blades of an old-fashioned lawnmower. As with the others, toward the end he closed his eyes and let the memories take hold and guide his wand. He wiped the sweat off his brow and took a large gulp of water. Arthur's talisman appeared strong and clean. It looked the most like Ron's. He glanced down at the next clump of silver and wondered what he would find there. It made him vastly uncomfortable. He did not want to probe his emotions in regards to Severus Snape, but he likewise could not leave him out. He grimaced and set to work. It was every bit as draining as he expected. It did not truly surprise Harry that he loved. He grimaced just thinking about it, Snape. He'd known for a very long time that he respected both the old Snape and the new. He also admired the new Snape for his ability to overcome his bitterness. He thought of Snape's bravery in going to Voldemort again and again, keeping a secret inside his head that would get him killed in an instant. He thought of the fact that it had been Snape's love for Harry's mother that had led him to do this. He even put in his admiration of the fact that, in the last timeline, no matter how much Harry had impugned his name, Snape had kept the secret. He snorted when he saw a line that looked very like a snake. In Ron's talisman, it had been a broomstick. I still can't get over the fact that they all look so different, Harry said. He laid Ron's and Snape's side by side, and he saw two completely different objects that were, nevertheless, exactly the same. He shook his head. I'm deeper than I thought. Ginny laughed. It's almost time for dinner, she murmured in his ear. We got about half an hour. Do you have time to make mine? No, Harry said, but we have time for something else. She circled around him and sat on his lap. I was hoping you were going to say that. I think you might need a little reminder of how much you love me. Harry unbuttoned her blouse and slipped his hand inside. Never, he said, but I'm not going to say no to having it reinforced just a little. Everyone came to dinner that night. Harry suspected that Ron had issued a command, but he did not voice his suspicions. It felt too good to sit around a table full of giddy people and excellent food. He remembered these moments of camaraderie from last time. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. Well, Harry knew what it would bring for him, and everyone was a bit punch-drunk from the uncertainty. His entire body felt light. He glanced around the table, and it struck him what a miracle it was that so many of them had survived to this point. There were only two empty places, Neville and Moody. The rest were there, faces alight with a mixture of terror and elation that the time to fight, really fight, was so close. I don't want them to come back for me, Harry realized with a start. He knew that despite whatever she had seen at the Department of Mysteries, despite the fact that she knew that he had to do this, Ginny would be tempted to play with time again. Adding them into the mix with Merlin, who appear to have the opposite goal, would likely be catastrophic. But the last thing he wanted to do on the eve of his death was to start an argument with Ginny and Ron. Percy laughed at something Fred said, and Harry had an idea. If Harry told Percy to give them a message, they would listen to him. He hoped they would listen to him. If it came from anyone else, they might listen to Sirius, but Harry did not want to force his godfather to convince anyone to let James' son stay dead. I'll write him a letter, Harry thought. After Ginny is asleep. Harry and Ginny were the last to arrive at Hogwarts the next day. It was late afternoon. The sun was steadily moving toward the mountains, and night was rapidly approaching. Harry felt almost lightheaded with relief that he had not been expected to plan what would come next. Ron had done everything. Harry had only had to show up in the Great Hall. What the dash? Harry said, shocked, when he and Ginny entered. It was filled with people, most of whom Harry did not know or only recognized in passing. He saw the two women who had argued so fiercely about the frying pan, or it might have been a shoe, sitting next to each other at the table normally reserved for Slytherin. Amos and Cedric Diggory sat over at the Hufflepuff table, and several shopkeepers from Diagon Alley congregated around Fred and George. Turns out a lot of people wanted to help, Ron said. He shrugged nonchalantly, but Harry saw the pride in his eyes. Harry gave a lopsided smile. Well done, General, he said. Ron tilted his head toward Hermione, and the chain he wore, upon which hung the talisman that Harry had made him, glinted in the light. How many do you reckon? More than 100, Ron said. So we've modified our plans a little. Snape's telling Voldemort that 20 people showed up with us. We're hoping he'll bring his full force. Save us the work, later. Harry nodded. He was about to open his mouth and thank Ron when he found himself gripped tightly around the arm and dragged away. Hey, he said loudly. Percy glared at him. What the hell did you mean by that letter you shoved under my door? Harry had been hoping that he would not be confronted about this. Late the night before, after he had finished Ginny's rune and she had fallen asleep, he had agonized over what he wanted to tell Percy. He had finally simply written, "Tell Ginny and Ron not to come back for me." Just what it said, Harry said firmly. But Harry shook his head. Listen, you're going to understand soon enough. Just tell them, all right. Percy's mouth was set in a firm line, and he looked as though he would like nothing better than to beat Harry with a bludger until he told Percy what he had meant by the note. Are all the students out? Harry asked, hoping to divert his attention. Of course, he said stiffly, except for the ones of age that wished to fight. Harry looked around and saw Ernie Macmillan standing around with Dean Thomas, Daphne Greengrass, and Anthony Goldstein. He suspected that quite a few members of Potter's army had stayed behind. No stragglers? He pressed, just to be certain. No, Percy said. We checked with the Marauders map that Sirius had. They're all gone. We sent them to the safe houses where all the Muggleborns were staying. Good, Harry said. He cast about for something to say. Anything. When the sound of a very loud bell filled the room. Everyone immediately stopped talking, and everyone turned, almost as one, toward the doors that led to the entrance hall. Harry did not need anyone to tell him what that sound meant. He had apparently arrived just in time. Voldemort had arrived. A small, warm hand slipped into his. People were talking. Harry heard Snape mention something about their plan working, and Sirius responded with question. The Weasleys were issuing last-minute instructions. Potter's army was congregated near the head table. They appeared to be chanting something, though Harry's ears felt as though they'd been filled with cotton. He looked around again, and his eyes found Molly and Arthur. He regretted that he had wasted this last year on a hurt that somehow seemed quite childish now. Tell them I love them, he said. I'm pretty sure they'll figure it out, Ginny said. Her voice wobbled. Even so, Harry said. They stared at each other for a few moments. Harry opened his mouth to tell her again just how much he loved her. Voldemort's voice, magically amplified, washed over them like a cold wave. Everywhere around him, people's faces set in grim lines. Ron spat on the ground at his feet. All wands were drawn, though everyone knew not to attack until Ron gave the signal. It registered dimly on Harry that Ron's plan had worked. Voldemort had brought an army against what he thought was about 30 people. Give yourself up, Harry Potter, Voldemort said. and I will spare what few friends you have left. You have 20 minutes to come to me. If you do not, everyone in that building will die. On your head be it." Harry cleared his throat. He did not want their last memory of him to be of his voice shaking with fear. "That's my cue," he said in what he hoped was a light, casual tone. He saw face after incredulous face turn toward him. "What do you mean, Harry?" Fred asked. Others echoed him, until the hall rang with confusion. "What's that supposed to mean? What's he talking about? How does he expect? Why is he—" Harry's eyes met Dumbledore's. Dumbledore stood straight, though his face was lined with grief. He wore the talisman that Harry had made him over his robes, and it seemed to glow. "Don't worry," Harry said. He tried to sound reassuring. "I'm going to unleash my terrible power." Harry turned and found himself engulfed in a tight hug from Sirius. His godfather didn't say anything. Harry was not certain that Sirius could talk at this moment. Those who knew and loved him respected his desire not to have to say goodbye. But Ginny, Ron, Hermione, and Luna followed him out of the Great Hall, where everyone was murmuring excitedly. Harry could hear Charlie speculating about what exactly the terrible power was, and into the entrance hall. None of them said anything. It was too big for words. Harry let his eyes linger on all of them. He wondered if he would exist enough to miss them. "Harry," Ginny said softly. Harry kissed her. It was like the kisses they shared after they had lost everyone, when the only things separating Harry from complete despair had been her and Ron. He tasted salty tears and wondered if it was her crying or if it was his tears. After what felt like only a second, Harry pulled away. Luna caught Ginny and threw her arms around her, whispering in her ear. Harry turned away. The 5 steps that took him from just inside the entrance hall to right over the threshold were perhaps the hardest steps that he had ever taken. He kept his back straight. He did not look back. He did not want to see the look of fierce anticipation that must surely be written on the faces of those who did not know what he was about to do. He tapped himself with his own wand and murmured the spell that would turn him invisible until just before he met Voldemort. Voldemort was waiting. Harry wiped his sweaty hands on his robes. He paused and leaned against the wall of the castle. "I wish that he wasn't waiting for me right here, where everyone can see," he thought a little desperately. Everyone who had chosen to fight the Death Eaters and Voldemort had a very good view. The light of the setting sun spread across Hogwarts, and Voldemort and his followers stood out in stark relief. Harry took a few more steps and then paused again. He stood in the middle. Before him were his enemies. Behind him were the people he loved far more than his own life. He had never felt more alone. "I'm here." It was Merlin, and it was as though he had read Harry's thoughts. "I can do this," Harry said fiercely, defensively. "I'm not going to back out. I'm going to do this. If that's why you're here." "Of course not." Merlin sounded surprised, shocked even. "You've always been able to do this. Then why are you here?" Harry asked. He sounded a bit desperate even to his own ears, and he was aware that he was drawing out the time, trying to solve this one last mystery. "If I can do this, if I didn't need you to—" He tried to think of the right words, his mind scrambling. "Encourage events to play out the way they have. Why are you even here?" They had started walking again. Harry could feel Merlin at his side. He moved when Harry moved, and if Harry focused on their steps, he could almost forget what lay ahead. The silence stretched out for 10 steps, Harry counted, and it seemed like Merlin would withhold this information. "I didn't want you to be alone," said Merlin. Harry knew by the thickness of Merlin's voice that the other man was close to tears. Harry's eyes were strangely dry. He walked forward several more steps, and Harry found that Merlin's words had enabled him to lengthen his stride. Merlin followed pace. He squinted and imagined he could see the red of Voldemort's eyes. "Are you wearing my cloak?" Harry asked. "You didn't have to steal it, you know. The Resurrection Stone was destroyed long ago." "I didn't know," Merlin admitted after a long pause. "Now you do," Harry said. Harry felt fingers brush against his arm and then grip it tightly. "Listen," Merlin said in a low, urgent voice. "I'm so sorry. I really am. Please forgive me." Harry did not know what to make of this apology. His thoughts were a confusing swirl as fully half his mind was occupied with the large cluster of Death Eaters, Dementors, Giants, and Werewolves, and he could not devote his full attention to the strange conversation he was having. Merlin had come from the future, which must mean that he knew something that Harry could not know. "I think you care about what's going to happen in a few moments," Harry said a bit recklessly. He was much more at ease sharing his feelings. He only had a few more minutes to feel uncomfortable. After all, that makes it easier, knowing that you don't like this. So, of course, there is no need to apologize. "I care very much," Merlin said immediately. Harry nodded, forgetting that Merlin could not see him. "I thought you might." If Merlin did not care about Harry, why would he walk with him to lend him courage? He did not need to understand Merlin's motivations to know that Harry walked beside a friend. And now that it was happening, it felt almost inevitable that Merlin be here, whoever he may be. Harry and one person who loved him. Merlin could be almost anyone, yet his faceless nature made it almost as though everyone he loved stood with him. Harry took another step forward, and then another, and then several more until he was very close. He could hear the Death Eaters talking loudly, and felt the chill of the Dementors, who flanked the humans and giants and werewolves. He refused to let them affect him. He did not want his last moments to flee with him feeling an unnatural despair. "Will you take the disillusionment charm off of me?" Harry asked in the barest of whispers. "I don't want to be tempted to use my wand." "When you're ready," Merlin breathed. Harry put his wand away and took a few more steps forward. Voldemort was perhaps 10 feet away. He was not speaking to his followers. He stared straight ahead. He seemed certain that Harry would show up. He understood that Harry would not allow his friends to die. He was right. His long, spidery fingers held his wand in a loose grip that pointed it up toward his chin. Harry's insides gave twist. Harry took another deep breath. "I'm ready." Several things happened at once. Harry flickered back into visibility, and the followers of Tom Riddle immediately began to jeer and laugh at what they thought was his stupidity. Harry heard a furtive, wheezing sound and saw Peter Pettigrew giggling. Voldemort was silent, and almost at the same moment that Merlin took the disillusionment charm off of Harry, the clearing lit up with a faint, silvery light that seemed to warm Harry's body from the inside out. What seemed like hundreds of Patronuses congregated around Harry, though he knew that it could not possibly be that many. He took his eyes off of Voldemort and looked around in wonder. Dumbledore's Phoenix winged by. Ron's Terrier came to sit by Harry's feet. Mr. Weasley's Weasel, Kingsley's Lynx, Tonk's Wolf, and countless other animals of all shapes and sizes, emblems of hope and joy, came to stand stationary near Harry. Ginny's Doe walked on delicate feet to stand so close to Harry that he could feel the warmth like a kiss. He leaned toward it, trying to get as close to her as he could, and finally looked back to his oldest enemy. Voldemort's eyes were wide, and his lip was curled in a sneer of hatred and rage. "So much for your terrible power," Voldemort spat. He seemed disconcerted by the sheer number, and Harry could hear renewed murmurings from the Death Eaters. They sounded anxious. Wormtail scrambled backward, away from the light. Harry said nothing. "Your friends will let you die alone," Voldemort said. He sounded almost giddy. "Some friends." "I'm not alone," Harry said. He thought of Merlin and the Patronuses. His loved ones had his back, and he was the furthest thing from being alone. "And I'm lucky to have the type of friends that I do. I might have turned out like you, and then I really would have been alone. You're a waste of a man, Tom Riddle. But at least I'm alive," Voldemort hissed. Harry's legs felt very weak, but he kept his back straight and his head held high. Ginny's Doe did not waver, but gave him the strength to do what he must. He wished that it was solid. He wished he could lean against it in truth. Avada Kedavra! And Harry's world went dark.